Okay, tacos, here we go. Let's decide poor Joe's fate. If you haven't listened to the previous Death Row Joe episode, then go back and start there. For everyone else, let's grab some tissues. To start, John's going to talk a little history, but don't get scared. He's simply trying to understand how society, albeit one nearly 100 years ago, could rationale the killing of a kind-hearted soul like Joe Arridy. In fact, similarities between Joe's story and our world today are striking, although perhaps just hidden in plain sight. Joe had the mind of a 4-year-old child, endured with a sense of wonder, bringing so much joy and laughter to those around him, even to the ones who believed he should die. Maybe we can all learn some things from Joe. Perhaps it's not the Joes who grow up too slow, but for all of us who grow up too fast.
All right, I'm going to run through Henry Arridy, the father, his background. I'm going to run through a lot of stuff. This is going to be very dense. Henry Arridy, we do not have a picture of him. He immigrates from Mount Lebanon. He's Syrian-born, immigrated to America. Okay, his wife Mary comes 3 years later. They have a bunch of children. Just like in the 30s, a lot of them die. That's just how it happened back then. He worked in the same place that everyone else worked at, which was CFI, which was the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company. Everyone worked at that. In fact, Pueblo, where he moved to, and then his wife joined him, huge population there, 50,000, even today's standards, that's huge. Everyone worked at the same place. They worked at the mill there. That's where where everyone worked. Okay. 1885, Congress passed the Contact and Labor Law. Real quick, going through this. That stops companies who badly needed these workers because at first they were going overseas, getting immigrants, bringing them back. Now, we are living in a very polarizing time right now where you hear the immigration stuff all the time. So this is relevant. It has been relevant, but for over 100 years, this has been extremely relevant. So it's not something new. Oh, immigrants are coming here. This was a big thing back then too. Companies were going over there, grabbing these workers from everywhere they grabbing these workers from everywhere they can. Italy, Syria, wherever they can pull them, they'll bring them over here and basically put them to slave labor in their factories. 15,000 immigrants per day move through the docks. 15,000 a day move through the docks. And only two out of 10 of them were rejected. Wow. They were chalked. And this is, I know it's kind of like educational, but it's very important to understand because I don't want to just tell you why they were trying to kill this guy. And I'm not going to tell you if they kill him or not yet. I'm not just going to tell you, oh, they killed him or didn't kill him. I want to tell you why. Like, what's the mindset? Why were they subconsciously trying to do this?
They wanted the reward?
No, it's not. It is, but there's deeper stuff than that.
Because he was an immigrant.
There's deeper seated stuff than that. Here, this is being chalked.
The immigrants moved in a single file through the stockyard maze of passageways and under the eye of a doctor in blue uniform who had his hand in a piece of chalk. He was a tough instant diagnostician. He would look at the hands, the hair, the faces, and rap out a few questions. He might spot a panting old man with purple lips, and he would chalk out on the back a capital H for suspected heart disease. Any facial blotches, a hint of gross eczema, brought forth a chalked F for facial rash. Children in arms were made to stand down to see if they rated an L for limp of rickets or some other deficiency disease. There was one chalk mark that every family dreaded, for it guaranteed certain deportation. It was a circle with a cross in the middle, and it indicated feeble-minded.
So that's kind of like crosshairs.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Wow.
All right. Joe Arridy was born April 29th, 1915 in Pueblo. Okay. Large population, like I said, 59,000 people. In 1921, he goes to the local elementary school, Bessemer Elementary School. That was in 1921. In 1922, the principal calls his parents in, Henry and Mary, and said he can't come to school anymore because he's too slow to keep up. So now he's at home. I need to point out Henry and Mary, his mother and father were first cousins. Which is there's something that's not very well known, but because they kept it very hidden. But do you know Einstein? We were talking about Einstein earlier. He married his
cousin.
He married his first cousin, Elsa. And I never knew this, and it was not even in his biography that one guy wrote. But apparently, he had not illegitimate because they had the child, but she was, disabled, mentally disabled. They kind of kept her under wraps, and I think she died like in the 90s, 91 or something like that.
Kind of like how the Kennedys had their daughter who was kind of kept away from public eye. I don't think it was incestuous. But JFK had a sister. Mary,
now I know what
I
you're talking
think.
about. Yeah.
Or Margaret. Mary or Margaret, one of the two, I think.
Joe Arridy was slow by all standards.
Or was it?
At the time, he had a mental age of 4 to 6, and he will continue. So that mental age stayed the same throughout this story. He stayed home after he was kicked out of school, and he was a pretty happy boy. However, that happy boy was also one more mouth to feed to a family that's barely making it. Henry, he worked as a sand pourer for the company, a very low of the totem pole job. He poured sand so they can make the glass or whatever. He was also very suggestible, and not only that, but the family started struggling. Now they have a boy, Joe Arridy, that can't go to school, can't be productive, and is causing the family strain. Plus, they have a few more children after that. Friends, family, and even the church of the parents convinced Henry, the father, that his son, Joe Arridy, should be put in front of a lunacy board. Because that was the reason for their hardship. So the friends, family, and the church, I'm trying to get you the mindset. It's not some big conspiracy. Everyone is thinking this way. The feeble-mindedness, everyone. The church is saying, listen, you need to put him in front of the lunacy board because he is all your problems. All the problems you're having right now, the financial stuff, all this stuff, the stress with your wife, all of it's because you're taking care of him. That's the reason. The church is telling them that. The friends, their family members are telling them that. So, and the book goes into quite a bit about how Henry knows he made a mistake and tried to get his son back multiple times. It's actually very sad, his story, because he really wanted his son back. It was very heartbreaking because once you put him in a lunacy board and they take him, it's hard to get him back. So, eventually they decided to do it. And another reason why is because they were both immigrants, and if the church is telling you, they're already causing waves with this, right? All right. Now, I'm gonna blow your fucking mind. I'm gonna blow your mind, and this just blew my fucking mind right out the water. You guys are not gonna believe this shit at the fuck all.
Okay, I'm trying to prepare myself.
This is gonna change everything you think about ever. This right here, the picture you're looking at, doesn't really relate directly to the story, but this is the start of it from what we know so far. This was published June 1896 in The Atlantic. This is way before the story we're talking about, but I'm trying to tell you the thoughts of why people thought like this. The paper was by Francis A. Walker called Restriction of Immigrations. Whatever your thoughts on immigration is, I'm not going to get into any of that. That's not my thing. But I'm just telling you exactly how it happened. Quote, the question today is of protecting the American rate of wages, the American standard of living, and the quality of American citizenship from degradation through the tumultuous access of vast throngs of ignorant and brutalized peasantry from the countries of Eastern and Southern Europe, end quote. You see that come out, and this is a law professor, very smart, intelligent guy. He writes this. It gets in The Atlantic, which is, still a huge newspaper, but back then, completely freaking, taking over.
Yep.
He calls the immigrants, quote, persons that are deaf, dumb, blind, idiotic, insane, pauper, or criminal who might otherwise become a hopeless burden upon the country, perhaps even an active source of mischief, end quote. That changed a lot of stuff. You guys are really about to see where I'm going with this. This, Jen might know what this is. This is the American Association on Intellectual and Development Disabilities. That's what it's called right now. I'm not talking bad about this at all. It's it's probably an amazing organization, but back in the day, it used to be called the American Association for the Study of the Feeble-Minded. And I'm going through this really quick. Gregor Mendel's work and the work combined with Francis Walker with the immigrations got in front of the desk of the president of this organization. His name was Henry Goddard. He was the CEO and president, the founder of the American Association for the Study of Feeble-Minded. It later became, even when this book was written, it was still called the American Association on Mental Retardation. Now that term is out and is now called, what it is now, AAIDD. Going off the research of Mendel, he wrote this book called The Kallikak Family, which Stephen Gould, which I have a couple of his books, I never read them, but he's a big science guy, the writer, prolific writer. He says the book that this guy wrote, the guy that started the American Association for the, whatever it was, intellectual disabilities, the guy that started that, the president, wrote a book called The Kallikak Family, which Stephen Gould says is, quote, the primal myth of the eugenics movement, end quote. The guy that started the American Association for Mental Retardation in America wrote a book that is the primal myth of the eugenics movement. You guys understand what I'm telling you? When did Hitler come to power?
The 40s.
When was this book written? 1912.
Oh.
1912, he wrote this book. The Kallikak family told the tale of a supposedly degenerate family from rural New Jersey, beginning with Deborah. Like most books in this genre, the pseudoscientific treatise described generations of illiterate, poor, and purportedly immoral Kallikak family members who were chronically unemployed, supposedly feeble-minded criminals, and in general perceived as a threat to racial hygiene. Basically, this war hero here, he goes back on shore leave and he has sex with a barmaid of very low intelligence. She's there on the left. Then he goes back to his well-respected family and has a baby, another baby, with a well-respected woman of good means. And he's basically doing the rabbits having sex theory, that they multiply, the idiocracy theory, right? So the feeble-minded barmaid has
more children.
Those children multiply. Whereas the well-to-do family that he was supposed to, only raise the children with, they have one or two. They're all good in society, stuff like that. The reason I'm trying to say this is because at the fucking time you have mass immigration coming in. They're taking jobs. People are getting tired of it. No one likes these immigrants.
Irish need not apply.
Now you have some guy that is the director of the Feeble-Mindedness Institute. Who else could be a more prominent person to say this? He writes a book saying he followed this real guy, and his family from this barmaid multiplied by the hundreds, and they're all feeble-minded. They're all criminals. They're all a burden to society. This is a bestseller book here. A bestseller. Do you guys understand what I'm trying to get with here?
Mm-hmm. It influenced Hitler.
There's a problem with the book.
The story wasn't true.
It was fucking fake. Completely made up by this guy. In fact, the pictures that they used, he went and took pictures of actual poor children And
with intellectual disabilities?
Well, just people like in the mud and just sitting there poor and trying to get society to take care of them. He took like black ink and kind of crossed the eyes out a little bit to make them more scary looking. And then the other well-to-do family, he did the exact opposite. Not to mention the whole thing was fucking fake. Everything completely fake. But its influence as the book of eugenics that started in America was very fucking influential.
There are Kallikak families all about us. They're multiplying at twice the rate of general population. And not until we recognize this fact and work on this basis, we will begin to solve these social problems.
So, and his suggestion was what? Let's develop all these, what do we call them today? Mental health institutions. They were called insane asylums. Mm-hmm. All that was started by this one guy to put the feeble-minded in because of this fake book and this theory.
Wow.
So anytime you see a mental health facility nowadays, you know where it comes from. Kind of fucked.
Well, a lot of them, a lot of the hospitals that were around back in the day are not around now. The asylums. I mean, you do have institutions, for sure, but a lot of them, the ones that were run when this was, being instituted, are not around. Like, for example, the one that always comes to mind is Taunton State Hospital, like in Massachusetts. That's where they filmed the Shutter Island. That's where they filmed that. But I mean, they closed them down because of the living conditions. So.
Well, most of them were immigrants, as you're about to see. If you want to, because I mean, they all these immigrants. I mean, the Congress passed the law because they wanted to stop immigrants. They wanted, and companies were just going and putting them on boats. So they basically made the law to say, all right, well, you can't do that, but now they got to come through a port, and we'll decide if they can stay here.
This is the ghastly story of the descendants of Martin Kallikak Sr. from the nameless feeble-minded girl. Although Martin Sr. himself paid no further attention to the girl nor her child, society has had to pay the heavy price of all the evil he engendered.
Okay, I think I kind of derailed this whole episode with all this stuff.
No, it's really interesting.
All right. His results. So the United States Public Health Service was so moved by his book at the time, everyone thought it was real, that they gave him the responsibility of judging all the mental defects in immigrants. And here's his results, which, of course, if the book ain't even real, how the fuck is this going to be real? 83% of Eastern European Jews, 80% of Hungarians, 79% of Italians, 87% of Russians, feeble-minded.
Yeah, fucking false. I'm just gonna say.
One other guy I gotta talk about real quick. Madison Grant, Yale graduate, Yale professor, American lawyer, writer, zoologist, known primarily for his work as a eugenicist and conservationist, and advocate of scientific racism, as one of the leading thinkers and activist of the progressive era. In 1967, he wrote a book.
Did you say scientific racist?
Scientific racism, yeah.
Scientific racism.
Quote, he believed the qualities of the Polish Jew, dwarf stature, peculiar mentality, and ruthless concentration of self-interest are being engrafted upon the stock of the American nation, end quote. Who does that sound like?
Yeah,
because that's the desk it ended up at.
I mean, that's me.
Dude.
That's me.
Next time.
Yeah. I'm Polish.
I didn't know you were Polish.
Yeah, Polish and Russian Jew.
You're friggin'.
I am Hitler's worst fucking nightmare. But you know what?
Ruthless concentration of self-interest.
Fuck you.
Here's the takeaway that I'm about to piss a lot of people off. Even myself. America is the fucking cause of all the Hitler shit. If you really boil it down, where did he get his ideas?
It's an interesting lens of how that
shit.
science was fed to him.
I just want to.
And it all started from one. It all started from that one guy. Well, it all started from Mendel, I would imagine, and then that pseudoscience.
Mendel was legitimate science, and everything else is pseudoscience.
I know, but that pseudoscience branched from him. Then you had the Italian science I barely mentioned that said, I wonder if we could use this to improve intelligence. That's what he said, improve intelligence of the nation, but don't do it. And of course, the guy that owns the American Disabilities for Mental Defectiveness, Feeble-mindedness, was like, I'm going to do that.
Well, and then you have now, people testing their kids before they're born to see if they're going to develop any type of genetic disabilities or intellectual disabilities, and I'm not going to go into that whole argument again, but that's just it's crazy. I think it's interesting, though. I do want to comment on how you said that the quote about self-interest, about they're saying about the Polish Jew, how self-interest, but really that's what this whole writing they were about preserving the self-interest of Americans and keeping American jobs and the rate of pay. So that's just kind of hypocritical.
Let's get back to Joe Arridy. Sorry about that derailment there, but you guys understand it's not the sheriff trying to kill Joe Arridy here. And I'm not saying he did eventually kill him. It's the nation. We all thought like this, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. You know what I'm saying? Feeble-minded is the chalk. Remember we talked about the chalk, the one that you're definitely getting deported. So now this guy's like, fucking everyone coming over obviously the American public is like, fuck yeah, right? It's just crazy, man. It's one of those dark times that they don't fucking teach you. They don't teach you that shit in school, man. Fucking nuts. I never knew that shit. You know what I'm saying? So now Joe Arridy, obviously he didn't do it at all. He is being put on death row as everyone would be at that time. So now he's got to try to fight for his way out. And he fortunately had a lot of good people on his side to do that. And even the psychiatrists who knew that the confession was going to hold and stuff like that were trying to call him insane, where, he did it, but he's just insane, stuff like that. But and this is the classification. This is where we get his exact age. For practical purposes, we classify all individuals whose mentality is less than a 5-year-old level as idiots. From the 5-year level to the 9, we feel that they are imbeciles. I am speaking of adults who are afflicted with mental defects. And then above that, from the 9th to the 12th year level into the moron grade. So that was their terminology, man. Fucking idiots, imbeciles, and morons. Holy fuck.
Awful.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
They asked the psychiatrist, you would say he is above the idiot. You mean about 6 years old? About that. In some ways, he may be a little above the 6-year-old. In others, a little less than the 6-year-old.
Ooh.
Real quick, some inconsistencies. Now, I don't know if Frank Aguilar did it. He said the whole time he didn't. He definitely didn't know who Joe was. At this point, you got both of them giving confessions that were completely off until they got it right, type of thing. Frank Aguilar was also an immigrant. Remember, he was a Mexican, and he was also feeble-minded. And he had a family and kids and all that stuff. I can promise you he didn't do it, but this story is about Joe, so. But Joe Aguilar had never met Frank ever. The house, remember, the light was off, and that's how the mother knew something was wrong. In the confession that Joe Arridy, that they give to the jury, the confession, he says he turns the light on. A neighbor, Frank Gorshay, said when he gets home from his job at the steel mill at 11:20, the light was on, and that was around the time of death. Joe, did you turn on the light? Yes. Now, that was from his confession. Footprints matching one shoe in the backyard, so only one person was there, not two. So they basically are trying 2 people for this. You guys understand this, right? They're putting 2 people on death row for this, and they're going to attempt to kill them both. That's the goal here. Kill them both. Now they can double the reward money. But there's inconsistencies. Like there's only one set of footprints, and they didn't know each other at all. Joe, and this is about the footprints. They were running away in the backyard. Joe, did you have sexual intercourse? I don't know what you mean. What did you do to the girls? I screw them. Did you go out the back door? No, the back door was locked. I went out the front. So he went to his mother's house. They put me upstairs in the house, made me hide. Remember they haven't seen him for 6 fucking years?
Yep.
I didn't get into this, but a pawn shop owner said that Joe came and bought a gun. I didn't get into a lot of stuff, but because I got derailed. But Joe, he at the time was living in a mental facility, a lunatic facility, if you will. He escaped because he found the immigrants coming in on the trains. And he found train hopping to be really fun, but he didn't have any money. But there was like a pawn shop owner that said that Joe came in there and bought a gun. It's like, and I wish the defense lawyer had been like, with what money? He didn't have any fucking money. Like, how's he buying guns? Like, what the fuck? Anyway, Joe Arridy put on death row. Besides the sheriff that put him there trying to get the reward and others, he had a ton of supporters. The warden, in fact, Warden Best, was known for his unconventional style of being a warden. He was hated, but this guy was amazing. It was claimed that he would actually at night bring Joe to his own house, cook him dinner and stuff. He was a really nice guy. Joe at the time, remember, he's a child, so...
mentally.
Yeah, mentally. Warden Best bought him a train, like one of those... trains that you pull back and it goes, and he would just sit there all day and play with his train, all day long playing with his train. Warden Best, as far as his unconventionality, this is a great idea. When inmates have a problem with each other, they solve it in a boxing ring with boxing gloves, and they earn the respect that they want instead of killing each other. That's a fantastic fucking idea, is it not? Holy shit. You know what I'm saying?
They actually, in the show Riverdale, I was watching that, and then one of the seasons they had like an underground boxing ring with the inmates. It was like a youth prison, and they like had the kids.
It all began when Joe was observed polishing his metal dinner plate hour after hour until it functioned like a mirror. He busied himself by making faces in it and talking to himself. Warden Best brought Joe some picture books. Joe responded with laughter and began turning pages and looking at the pictures until the books fell apart. When Best brought him a pair of scissors, Joe set to work cutting out some of the faces. He hummed as he worked.
Well, they killed Frank Aguilar. They're definitely not going to kill...
He was on death row and they killed him.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that... I mean, he confessed at the very end, but...
It didn't seem like a true confession.
No, it didn't. Joe Arridy is known as the happiest man on death row at the time. He was the newspapers, school kids would come. The inmates loved him. This is really sad. Joe Arridy was on death row, and an inmate on death row knows that he's going to die, right?
Right.
Joe, his mental capacity didn't really understand that. So the inmates actually spent weeks, and they were really nice to Joe, really nice. And they were trying to get him to understand what's going to happen to him so he can kind of come to peace with it. In fact, the reverend that goes in and gives the last rites, he had to go multiple times, and I believe he wanted to, but he couldn't quite get Joe, because they're not just, you can't just kill someone and they don't even know.
Right.
He didn't understand what was going on. I mean, you tell a 6-year-old child, you got to die. And for instance, he says, the one reporter says, don't you want to be killed, Joe? And Joe says, no, I want to live. I want to live here with Warden Best.
Oh, no.
I mean,
God, that breaks my heart.
Yeah. Sad story.
Yeah, it's fucking really sad, dude.
Yeah, Malachi. Ugh.
He had that train. I was talking about, the little toy train. Warden Best would actually take batteries in it because it had a little light on it and replace the batteries for him. One of the inmates and him were playing with the train. He would reach. So here's what's great about this though, because it makes you really happy. At night, when the guards come around and they do their bed checks, and all the inmates were cool with this. 100%. They all loved Joe. He was like the little son almost. The guards would close off the doors so no inmate could escape or whatever. I mean, their cells would be locked, but the guards would come in, let Joe out of his cell, and now he has the whole floor to play with his train. And the inmates would stick their arms out and play with it.
Oh,
and
that's so sweet.
I know it's sad. Reading the book breaks your heart because you really get to know the dude, it seems like. But so the inmates would stick their hand, tip the train over, and Joe, quote, Joe would shout with glee, a wreck, fix the wreck, he would call. The guard who, man, this is like too hard to read.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking.
The guard who found probably 1,000 wrecks of Joe's train would unlock the door leading to the corridor behind the screen, and everyone entered the game just to keep Joe happy. Freaking terrible, man.
Poor thing.
Joe thrived. He was safe, secure for the first time in his life. Here, no one beat him because people, on the outside, he would get raped like Joe would, from
the
boys.
prisoners?
No, from boys, like outside the prison, like in the mental institution and stuff. I could go into it, but
oh my gosh, that's so terrible.
Yeah, I don't want to go into it, but the cell was, the book says, quote, the cell was clean and Joe was never hungry. Once when Joe was granted a new sanity trial, Warden Best took Joe off death row and may have moved him into his own home. So, and he called him Buddy Best. So, crazy. Nuts, man. Fucking nuts.
Really
and it's just like to see the reporters would ask him, because it was pretty popular back in the day. The reporters would ask him, do you want to be killed? He says, no, I don't want to be killed. And then all of a sudden he would just, like laugh or whatever, or look at Warden Best and just joke. Like, he's a fucking 6-year-old, the mind of a 6-year-old, right? I mean, terrible, terrible shit.
Really sad.
So, now, a lot of people supported him, which is great. So one of the attorneys, his name was Ireland, got him 9 stays of execution, which is a fucking lot. I mean, they were pointing out the fact that, okay, the sheriffs they doctored these, like, for instance, here's
to
what
get the money, right?
Here's what they needed. They needed one thing. One thing would secure it for the sheriffs. They needed Joe Arridy to sign Frank Aguilar's, or the reverse, confession. If both signatures were on that confession, that will, because back then, if you say you did it, you did it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That would be the one thing they needed.
So they needed the other guy to sign off on the other confession to say that, to make.
But the confession, obviously, the real confession is one way. The confessions that weren't written down or anything were, it probably took weeks for them to get the story right. But Joe's name was signed, but it was at the very bottom. It was just weird how it was. I think it was doctored or something. The attorney managed to gain 9 stays of execution for Joe. All were based on the same old legal question, whether or not Joe was insane. So at this point, it's like, I can't prove that he didn't do it. Obviously, y'all think he did anyway. Let's just try to get him to be insane. It was the only legal plank available in those days. With each stay, Ireland seemed to come closer to saving Joe's life. Each time he tried a new and different attack. As Joe's final date with death approached, Ireland worked harder. Joe's last meal, and they gave him 3 days of last meals. I mean, that's how much they fucking loved him. But guess what his last meals were?
Cheeseburger.
For 3 days.
Ice cream.
Ice cream.
Oh.
This is sad, man.
It is sad.
I should have went to more into anyway. All right. They're not going to execute him, so it's good.
Yay. It's sad that he had to spend the rest of his days in prison.
All right. If you want to read this, Nicole.
The doomed youth was grinning as he entered the gas chamber, and prison officials began preparing him for execution in a small room off the steel execution chamber.
I thought you said they weren't executing him.
No, they killed him.
While Arridy's prison-style blue shirt and pants were removed, Father Schaller and Arridy of the 3 chairs in the small room. He was only clad in a pair of white socks and shorts. The grin left his face. When a block of bandage was placed over his eyes, he seemed puzzled, but the grin returned when Warden Best took his hand and reassured him. The guards then proceeded to quickly strap him into the chair. His arms and legs were drawn tight to the steel chair, a wide belt strapped against his chest and caught behind the chair. Then all the officials left the execution chamber except Father Schaller, who had tears in his eyes and took Arridy's hands and bid him goodbye. Then the priest left the chamber and the steel door was closed.
So this is like the famous... Joe is obviously sitting down, but that's his train. That's like the famous
that's the picture on the book.
Yeah. So
that's sad.
He was ultimately killed, and the sheriffs got their reward money.
That's terrible.
That's fucked, man.
So I know I went pretty far into the eugenics. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have, but
it's interesting.
Sorry about that.
No, it was a good lesson.
Now, this is rather recent right here. If you want to read this headline.
Governor Ritter pardons disabled man who was executed in 1939.
So this is actually from 2011. Governor Ritter, and this because of this book, he pardons. Joe Arridy finally gets his pardon in 2011. 2011, he was finally.
I'm glad he got his pardon.
Anyway, this is and they gave him a proper burial too, which is really nice.
Wow.
I like that they put that he was pardoned on his
It
stone.
says, "Here lies an innocent man," and they put the train. You see the?
Oh, were those his trains?
Oh, it's so sad.
Yeah, those are the trains. Fucking sad. The story's terrible.
That's Malachi. Come on, man.
That is sad. Very sad.
But yeah, innocent man. Mind of a child. I tried to do it more justice going into the fact that I don't know why. I don't think I did that story right.
No, you did.
You did fine.
So anyway, I don't know.
Thank you, Malachi, for another awesome request.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Malachi.
And other than the book, there's not really many sources. So I mean, I would go any questions like on Joe himself.
No.
I mean, it was sad. Like it talks about in the book, like how his mom would come right before he went to the gas chamber. It's like Joe didn't know what was going on, and the fact that they were trying to tell him over and over, and in the simplest terms. You know, at one point they were like, "Joe, do you know what heaven is?" And he kind of was like, I don't know. And then he's like, "Do you know what?" And then they said, "Do you know what a harp is?" And he said, "I know what a harp is." And do you know angels play a harp? You see how they're trying to get to
it. That's awful.
Don't like that.
I honestly, I can't listen to that type of shit.
Fucking read the book, man. The book is because you really get to know the guy. And he didn't do it. He didn't do it, and he's just fucking I don't know, sad, man. He's anyway. I definitely encourage anyone to go up there in Pueblo. If you ever are around the area, go visit his grave, man. It'd be really nice to see. It's a very sad story.
It is.
The eugenics thing's kind of weird, but anyway, I guess we'll go. I know you guys want to eat. But anyway, I hope you guys liked it. Thank you, Malachi, for the story. Go talkmore.com/join if you want to support us. We do live shows every Sunday. We're starting again next week. Also, remember, comment on the post and then go right above that and you'll see where you can put your email in there and you'll be automatically entered to win a $25 gift card every week. And that'll just be sent out automatic. It's like automatically set up. I don't even see it. So if you want to enter that, leave me a comment and we'll shout you out. Until next time, good night, you lovely, lovely people.